Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Go off to the wilderness, the wealthy man disinherited his son upon learning that he had become involved with a village orphan. When he came to see how they were living, he was stunned. From early childhood, Alfredo's father was the most important person in his life. Alfredo didn't just respect and love his father, he saw him as his idol and role model. His father was a neurosurgeon and spent a lot of time at work. Alfredo missed his father, and every day spent with him was a true celebration for the boy. Like his father, Benito Perez, he loved fishing and football, and he also became interested in medicine as he grew older and began thinking about his future profession. The only difference was that Alfredo became a general surgeon rather than a neurosurgeon. When Alfredo's mother died, he was only 11 years old. His father worried about how his son would cope with this stage. But, to his great surprise, the boy quickly dealt with the pain of loss. He loved his mother, but he loved his father even more. And since his father took a leave of absence and spent almost a month with his son, fearing for his psychological state, it made it easier for Alfredo to cope with his grief. Yes, he missed her, often remembered her, but Alfredo didn't shut himself off as some children do after losing a parent. Alfredo had a best friend, Carlos. The boy also came from a broken family. His father had died when Carlos was only 3 years old. The boys were already friends, and now they were further united by a similar life situation. As time passed after Alfredo's mother's death, Carlos began to scare his friend by saying that his father would bring another woman into the house, and she would treat Alfredo badly. But time went on, and his father did not bring anyone home. Alfredo grew up and began to show an interest in girls, but a stepmother never appeared in their home. One day, he decided to ask his father directly why he wasn't remarrying. "I don't need it," his father simply said. "There could only be one woman in this house, your mother, and there will never be another." "Dad, but you're still quite young. I would understand if you wanted to live with another woman." "Thank you, son, but I've made my decision." And then Alfredo fell in love. He was 16 when a new girl, Cecilia, joined their class. She had moved from another city to finish school with them. He constantly thought about her, tried to bring her chocolates and little gifts, and she reciprocated his feelings. Alfredo was happy and decided to invite Cecilia to his house to meet his father. His father's opinion was extremely important to him, but he didn't expect what was about to happen. In the evening, he asked his father when it would be convenient for him to meet Cecilia and on which evening he should invite her. At that moment, his father was reading someone's medical history and suddenly turned sharply and looked at his son sternly. "What girl? What are you talking about?" he asked irritably and surprised. "Dad, I told you that we have a new girl in our class, and we're friends. I really like her, and I wanted you to meet her." "Alfredo, listen to me very carefully and remember what I'm going to say. No girls until you've finished your education. None. They will distract you from your studies, and you need to study well and get a proper education if you plan to become a doctor worthy of your father." "But." "No buts. I've told you my opinion." Alfredo was shocked. He didn't expect his father to be so harsh and adamant, and he couldn't understand how his friendship with Cecilia could interfere, especially since he was doing well academically with no complaints from teachers. For the first time, Alfredo was deeply hurt by his father. He felt like crying from such unfairness. Alfredo called his friend and explained the situation. "Listen, this is ridiculous," Carlos exclaimed. "I don't understand his position. She's a normal girl. Why can't you be friends with her? Maybe he was in a bad mood and it just wasn't your lucky day? Try again another time." "Yeah, maybe. My father is planning to open his own clinic now. He's all caught up in business and concerns." "Well, you see. I tried talking to him again." "All right, I'll try." A week later, Alfredo brought up his girlfriend again. His father's reaction was worse than before. "I don't understand. Are you mocking me?" I explained my position clearly. "Why are you asking me about this again?" What didn't you understand the first time? I thought maybe you were focused or upset, and that's why you refused. Dad, tell me, why can't I be friends with a girl? It doesn't affect my academic performance. Because this is just the beginning. Right now, being friends with her doesn't affect your studies. But if you start a more serious relationship, believe me, it will affect you, very much so. But you haven't even seen her. What if you like her? I have no need to see her. I'm not changing my position. I suggest you seriously think about your future, not about girls. You'll have plenty of them, believe me. I thought we were friends and that I could trust you, Alfredo said, disappointed and barely audible. Precisely because I'm your friend, I advise you to focus on your studies and start preparing for university. And don't you dare be upset with me. But Alfredo was hurt, very hurt. He had already told Cecilia that he would introduce her to his father, and now he didn't know what to say to the girl. A week after that conversation, Alfredo and Cecilia had a falling out. He said he couldn't invite her to his house because his father was strongly against it. Cecilia, of course, was offended and stopped communicating with Alfredo. Alfredo took the quarrel very hard. His father noticed that his son had changed, but didn't ask why. He understood the reason and, deep down, was glad that Alfredo had followed his advice. Although the real cause of the quarrel was his father, not Alfredo's obedience. After finishing school, Alfredo enrolled in medical school. There were many girls in his course, but he paid no attention to them, remembering his father's advice. However, in his third year, he fell in love. It was the sister of one of his classmates, and they met at a student party. This time, Alfredo fell in love more seriously than in high school. He constantly thought about Clemencia and began skipping lectures to meet with her. This went on for more than a month, and then the university called his father and informed him that his son was missing lectures. And that's when everything erupted. His father had never yelled at Alfredo before. In fact, he had never raised his voice at him at all. But today, Alfredo didn't recognize his father. It felt like this wasn't his father at all. He said hurtful things, calling Alfredo selfish and accusing him of not caring about everything his father had done for him. Who will I leave the clinic to? Who? I worked so hard to open my private hospital where we can perform the most complex operations. Do you know what it took to get all the approvals and resolve all the issues? Do you know? I'm asking you. I've just paid off all the loans and am only now starting to make a profit from the clinic. I was hoping my son would become my successor. How can I leave you the clinic if you don't want to study? All you think about are girls instead of your studies. This is just terrible. I'm disappointed in your behavior and your attitude toward your future and me. This is pure ingratitude from you. Alfredo felt hurt, pained, and ashamed all at once. On one hand, his father was right, Alfredo had indeed neglected his studies a little. But on the other hand, he wanted a normal relationship with a girl. He wanted to have someone by his side, especially since all his classmates had girlfriends, and Alfredo was always the only one alone at parties. But trying to explain this to his father was pointless. Benito Perez wouldn't even listen. Dad, but I'm a young man, and I have certain needs, Alfredo said, embarrassed. You don't need a serious relationship for that, and certainly not at the cost of missing lectures, his father calmly responded. I understand, Dad, Alfredo agreed resignedly. I hope so, his father said just as calmly. After this conversation, Alfredo decided not to argue with his father anymore and dedicated all his free time to his studies. He graduated with honors, then completed 2 more years of training, a year of practice at a regional hospital, and only after that did Alfredo join his father's clinic. To be fair, Alfredo was a talented surgeon, and very soon he became well known in the medical community of his city. Jealous people believed that his fame was solely due to his father, but over time, after several high-profile successful operations, they were forced to admit that his father's name and clinic had nothing to do with it. The guy was naturally gifted. 5 years passed. Alfredo worked successfully at the clinic, and his surgeries were booked months in advance. His father was proud of him and pleased that he had managed to influence Alfredo in time. He was absolutely certain that it was thanks to his strictness and persistence that Alfredo became a top-class surgeon. Throughout all this time, Alfredo hadn't even tried to pursue a serious relationship with any girls. He had a couple of female friends with whom he sometimes spent the night, but nothing serious was in the plans of the young surgeon. The paradox was that he didn't feel anything for anyone, no infatuation or passion, just purely physiological needs and nothing more. But one day something unusual happened at the clinic. A young nurse named Christina joined the surgery department. Alfredo, now the deputy head of the department, hadn't had time to meet the new girl yet. She had only been working for a couple of weeks. That day, Alfredo was on duty. It was Saturday, and the new nurse Christina was also on her first night shift. They admitted a girl to the clinic via emergency with an acute case of appendicitis, and she was being prepared for surgery. Alfredo was asking the standard questions to the patient to find out if she had any allergic reactions to medications. At that moment, Christina approached them. She placed her hand on the girl's abdomen and confidently said, "Alfredo Perez, this is not appendicitis. The girl has an ectopic pregnancy." Alfredo almost fell over from surprise. He turned fully toward the nurse and asked in astonishment, "Based on what symptoms did you determine that?" "No symptoms, I just feel it." "Miss, this is not about feelings. We need to make an accurate diagnosis according to established rules and patient examination protocols." "But you didn't really examine her. You just trusted the emergency diagnosis." Alfredo couldn't tolerate such a serious accusation of unprofessionalism. "Who are you to question my diagnosis? I examined the patient. I didn't just blindly trust the diagnosis." He was furious. "Don't shout at me. But it's very easy to confuse an ectopic pregnancy with an acute appendicitis attack. Just listen to me and check, so you don't lose the patient," the nurse responded calmly and composedly. "Dolores Ramirez," Alfredo called out loudly to a nurse. "Have you taken the patient's tests?" "Yes, Alfredo Perez, I'm bringing them now." Dolores Ramirez ran over, clearly nervous. Alfredo looked at the test results and then glanced at Christina with surprise. He had to admit, she was right. "How did you know it was an ectopic pregnancy?" he asked again. "Alfredo Perez, let me explain later." "We're losing time," Christina responded calmly once again. The surgery was successful, but Alfredo couldn't calm down, troubled by the fact that a nurse managed to diagnose the patient without any tests, while he, an experienced surgeon, had almost missed it. Fatigue was clearly taking its toll. The day before, he had performed 2 long and complicated surgeries, and he really should have rested, but he volunteered to cover for a colleague whose wife was in the maternity ward. However, that was no excuse for the doctor. He changed and went to the nurse's station, but Christina wasn't there. Alfredo walked down the corridor of the department and suddenly heard Christina's voice. "Don't worry. Alfredo Perez is a talented surgeon. He'll do everything perfectly." She was comforting a woman who was about to undergo surgery to remove a tumor. "Let me help you a little. Lie on your side." Alfredo glanced into the room and saw Christina running her hand over the patient's lower back. He observed her for a few minutes, but suddenly the girl turned sharply and saw Alfredo. She continued to gently move her hand over the woman's back, and the patient fell asleep. Christina then exited into the corridor. Alfredo was still standing by the door. "Tell me, what were you doing just now?" Alfredo asked sternly. "I was helping the woman fall asleep. She has severe pain in that area, and unfortunately, the medication isn't helping. Her surgery is not until the day after tomorrow," Christina answered calmly, without fear. Alfredo was amazed by her composure. It seemed as though this girl didn't know how to raise her voice. She had a very beautiful and soothing voice. Even Alfredo felt calmer from it, as if his fatigue was fading away. "Alfredo Perez, you need to rest. Would you like me to make you some nice tea?" Christina offered. "And I can tell you how I diagnose illnesses." All right, Alfredo agreed obediently. He followed her down the corridor to the doctor's lounge, then sat in a chair, watching as Christina brewed some herbal tea. She placed the cup on the table, and Alfredo inhaled the incredible aroma. What kind of tea is this? I've never had it before. It's herbal tea. It's calming and relieves fatigue. You really need it right now. Drink it, you'll feel better soon. But really, you should get some sleep, Christina said kindly. Thank you. Now, tell me about your talent. How did you figure out it was an ectopic pregnancy? I've had this ability since childhood. Back then, I didn't understand how to use it or that it was an unusual gift, my talent. But over time, I learned, unfortunately, too late. Christina's voice grew even quieter. She lowered her head, trying to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. Alfredo realized that she hadn't been able to save someone close to her. That's the only reason someone would react this way. Did you lose someone? He asked sympathetically. Everyone. What do you mean, everyone? Alfredo didn't understand. My dad died when I was just born. He died in a car accident. I lived with my grandmother and mother. My mother died of cancer because the illness was discovered too late. I was only 11. And 3 years ago, my grandmother passed away. She had advanced ischemic heart disease, and she sought help too late. You see, we lived in a village, and the nearest proper clinic was very far away. You couldn't just travel there every time something hurt, so the locals treated themselves however they could. My grandmother was an herbalist, and she taught me a lot, but as often happens, she missed her own illness. She was convinced that her heart ached because of all the hardships she had endured in life. Before my mother's death, my grandmother had also buried her son, my uncle. So, that's how it was. Alfredo looked at the girl, and his heart was filled with a flood of emotions, pain, sympathy, admiration. How could such a young woman have endured so much grief in such a short life? He felt an overwhelming urge to protect her from all the world's troubles. You're very strong, Christina, truly. Not everyone could withstand so many tragedies. How did you end up in the city? I came to study as a nurse. I can't afford to go to university, but I have a strong desire to help people however I can, so I decided to become a nurse. You made the right choice to study. Medicine is a very important field, you help people, and that's incredibly valuable. Yes, thank you. I think so too. And can you only diagnose, or can you treat as well? I can relieve symptoms, ease pain, that's what I know for sure. You see, I'm still learning and haven't fully developed my abilities, but I never misdiagnose. She suddenly fell silent and looked away. I apologize for interfering today, the girl could have really died. You did the right thing, you were saving a life, and that's what matters most for a doctor. But I felt like you were angry with me, and I wouldn't want you to hold any negativity toward me. Besides, anger and hatred destroy a person from the inside and lead to various health problems. No, everything's fine, I wasn't angry. Don't worry, Alfredo lied. He didn't want to upset this sweet girl. Though, in truth, he had been angry with her at the time. They continued talking. Alfredo asked questions, Christina answered, and he listened, marveling at how, for the first time in years, he found it incredibly pleasant to talk to a girl. They weren't talking about anything specific, just life, work, hobbies. It was as though Christina had cast a spell on Alfredo. He couldn't take his eyes off her, and he didn't notice when morning came and his shift ended. Strangely, his fatigue had completely disappeared. Christina, thank you so much for the tea. I honestly don't feel tired anymore and feel ready to work another shift, Alfredo smiled. That's a bad idea and very wrong. You need to get a full 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Soon, the tea will stop working and you'll fall asleep on your feet, Christina smiled back. So, Alfredo Perez, go home and get some rest. Thanks for caring, for the tea, and for the nice conversation. I'll head home. He was already standing, ready to go change, when he suddenly turned and asked, Christina, where do you live? You don't have anyone here, do you? I don't have anyone anywhere, not just here. Not even a friend. I rent a room in an apartment from a woman. In which area? Alfredo asked. Christina mentioned the area, and Alfredo realized it would take her at least an hour to get home. All right, go clock out, and I'll wait for you, and we'll go home together. Christina was about to object, but Alfredo raised his hand, indicating it was pointless to argue. Objections won't be accepted. And hurry up, or I'll fall asleep at the wheel. Okay, Christina agreed meekly. They left the clinic and got into Alfredo's car, and he drove her home. On the way, they talked constantly about their culinary preferences, movies, and books. It was surprising, but this village girl was very similar to Alfredo. They liked the same books, authors, movies, and shared similar views and priorities. Christina got out of the car, thanked the doctor for driving her home, and confidently walked towards the entrance. Alfredo sat in the car, watching her leave. At that moment, he realized with complete clarity that he was in trouble. He had fallen in love, and it was a completely different feeling from anything he had ever experienced before. He felt drawn to this girl like a magnet. He wanted to keep talking to her, just sit next to her and look into her eyes. More than anything, he wanted to protect her and ensure no hardships or misfortunes came her way. Maybe it's just pity, he asked himself, but then immediately dismissed the thought. No, it's not pity. I want to be with her, to hold her, kiss her, simply talk and look at her. She draws me in, enchants me, captivates me. I don't know what other words to use, but it's definitely not pity. I could talk to her for hours just to be near her. Alfredo drove home feeling elated. He was incredibly happy. His father had returned early that morning from a conference in Italy, so he was home. As soon as he saw Alfredo, he could sense that something had happened. Hey, son. How are you? What's going on? Hey, Dad. Everything's great, really great. Have you fallen in love or something? His father asked calmly, without any reproach. Well, it's about time you started thinking about family. Good for you, congratulations. Alfredo felt like jumping around the house with joy. He had been afraid of his father's reaction and that the same thing that happened before might happen again with Christina. But everything was turning out wonderfully, and his father didn't mind his relationship with the girl. Thanks, Dad. She's an amazing girl, incredible, almost otherworldly, Alfredo said, recalling Christina's features. You've really got it bad, haven't you? His father observed. The diagnosis is clear. Get some sleep, and then you can tell me all about your alien. His father smiled and went to his office, while Alfredo headed to the bathroom and then happily collapsed into bed. He slept until evening and was woken by a phone call. It was Carlos calling. Hey, stranger, came the cheerful voice of his childhood friend. Hey, Alfredo replied in a sleepy voice. Are you sleeping? Were you on duty? Sorry, call me back when you're free. It's all good. I've been sleeping all day. What's up? Well, look at you. And you call yourself a friend. My birthday's on Saturday, remember? Did you forget? Oh no. Carlos, I'm so sorry, it totally slipped my mind. I'll definitely be there. Alfredo felt guilty because he really had forgotten his friend's birthday. Don't worry about it, I'm not mad. I get that you're swamped. You're a real friend, Alfredo smiled. Can I bring someone with me? Bring someone? Did I hear that right? Carlos asked, genuinely surprised. He knew all about Alfredo's issues with dating, or more accurately, his father's position on his son's relationships. Did your dad finally approve a candidate for your bride? No, he hasn't met her yet, but he knows I have a girlfriend now, and he's not against it. Even he was surprised. And who is she? She's amazing. You'll understand when you meet her. Where did you find her? She recently started working in our surgery department as a nurse. We met yesterday. Oh, well, that doesn't mean anything yet. Are you sure she likes you? These days, girls are hard to impress. So, my friend, maybe you're getting ahead of yourself. No, she's not like that at all. She's from a village where girls are simple and kind, and my Christina is just like that. From the village? Carlos clarified. Are you sure Benito Perez will approve of your choice? What does it matter where she's from? Alfredo didn't understand. The most important thing is that she's a wonderful person. Well, I don't know. To me, it doesn't matter at all. But knowing your father, I have my doubts about it. Maybe you shouldn't tell him she's from the village? Carlos, that's nonsense. We're not royalty ourselves. So, why would my father have any prejudices about that? My mom also came from a village before she met my dad. Well, I hope so. Anyway, I've got to run. See you both on Saturday at our restaurant at 7 p.m. Take care. Alfredo said goodbye to his friend and hung up, but the doubt Carlos had planted now lingered in his mind. What if Carlos was right, and his father wouldn't like the fact that Christina was from the village? What would happen then? No, that can't be. He just wants me to be happy. Besides, I've already completed my education and established myself as a surgeon. No, my father will definitely like Christina. Alfredo walked into the living room where his father was sitting at the table. Alfredo decided to postpone the conversation about his bride for now since he wasn't even sure if Christina would return his feelings. But Benito Perez was in a decisive mood. Had a good sleep? Now tell me, what kind of girl has managed to capture my son's heart? His father smiled. Dad, I think it's a bit premature to talk about this. She hasn't reciprocated my feelings yet, so there's really nothing to say. But I promise you, as soon as we have our first date, I'll introduce her to you. All right, I'll wait. But is she the daughter of someone I know? His father suddenly asked. No. Why do you think that? Well, your bride must be worthy of our family and come from a respectable background. I hope you understand that. Alfredo froze. Could Carlos be right? Would his father disapprove of his choice? Not wanting to dwell on guesses, Alfredo decided to ask directly. Dad, just tell me honestly, is it important to you that I'm happy? Of course, son, that's the most important thing. His father paused briefly before continuing, but the girl must be a good match for you. Understand? Of course, I understand. Alfredo breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Christina was a perfect match for him. She was also in medicine, she was well-mannered and educated, despite having grown up in a village, and she had a talent that could be called unique, which was also related to medicine. Now Alfredo felt at peace, reassured that his father wouldn't oppose his choice. The next day, Alfredo arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. On the way, he stopped by a pastry shop and bought Christina a box of profiteroles, little cream-filled pastries. He wasn't sure if Christina liked sweets, but he had a feeling she would enjoy them. Nurses typically started their shifts earlier, so he went to the nurses' station to find Christina. However, only Dolores Ramirez was in the room. Good morning, Alfredo Perez. You're here early today, the head nurse smiled. Good morning. Has the new nurse arrived yet? Dolores Ramirez feared that Christina might be fired for that incident with the diagnosis, so she immediately rushed to defend her, knowing that the shortage of nurses, even in a private clinic like theirs, was a serious issue. Alfredo Perez, please don't be angry with Christina. She didn't mean any harm. I've already reprimanded her for that case. Reprimanded her for what? Alfredo asked. Well, for interfering with the patient's diagnosis. You scolded her for that? Of course, a nurse shouldn't interfere with a doctor's work. Are you serious? So, we could have lost a young woman, Christina prevented it, and you scolded her? You should have given her a bonus, not a reprimand. Dolores was stunned. I thought it wasn't right. Dolores, remember, we all have the same goal, to avoid mistakes and, most importantly, prevent a patient's death. If a doctor makes a mistake and a nurse spots it, she must report it. Now, where's Christina? She called in sick. She won't be in today, Dolores said in a disappointed voice, now feeling guilty for reprimanding Christina. I see. When's my surgery today? At 11:30. All right, I'll head out for a couple of hours and be back in time for the surgery. Tell Elena to prepare the patient by the scheduled time. Alfredo turned and walked toward the exit. He needed to visit Christina and get back in time. Already sitting behind the wheel, as he was pulling out of the clinic parking lot, he realized he didn't know which apartment Christina lived in. He considered calling Dolores, but then thought better of it to avoid giving anyone reason to gossip. He'd figure it out when he got there. Arriving at the right building, Alfredo got out of the car and looked around. No one was outside. He confidently entered the building and started walking up to the second floor. Coming down the stairs was a woman in her 60s, and he thought she might know who was renting out a room in the building. Good morning. Can you help me? Someone is renting a room in your building. Could you tell me which apartment? The woman glanced at Alfredo from head to toe, assessing his well-groomed appearance and seemingly deciding that he didn't look like a criminal. Hello, young man. I can tell you, but only if you explain why you need that information. Our employee rents a room in this building. She recently started working with us, and we don't know her exact address, but she's sick. I wanted to check on her and see if she needs any help. The woman looked at Alfredo in surprise. Well, it seems that chivalry isn't completely dead these days. I'll tell you where your sick colleague is. Her name is Christina, right? She's in apartment 11, but she's asleep right now, with a high fever. She paused meaningfully before adding, let me open the door for you so she doesn't have to get up with such a fever. Alfredo realized that this must be the landlady of the apartment where Christina lived. I'd be very grateful, he smiled sincerely. They went up to the third floor and entered the apartment. The landlady, Emilia Santana, asked him to remove his shoes and wait while she woke up Christina. Alfredo stood in the hallway, feeling a slight nervous anticipation as he waited for Christina to come out of the room. He heard the girl ask who had come, and he smiled when he heard Emilia's response. I don't know, Christina. You'd know better. But he's a very nice man, a true gentleman. There aren't many like him left these days. Trust me, I know people. The door opened, and Alfredo saw his beloved. Christina didn't look well, to say the least. Her face was pale, her hair was disheveled, and there was sweat on her forehead. But despite her sickly appearance, to Alfredo, she was just as charming. Christina was clearly surprised to see Alfredo. Alfredo Perez, what are you doing here? Hello, Christina. I came to check on you. You didn't show up for work today. Hello, Christina managed to smile weakly. Do you visit all the nurses when they're sick? No, just the most talented and charming ones, Alfredo said, blushing, and he saw a blush appear on Christina's cheeks as well. That means she's pleased I came, Alfredo concluded to himself and handed her a box of pastries. Emilia Santana excused herself and left the apartment. Alfredo Perez, please come to the kitchen and we'll have tea, Christina suggested, barely able to stay on her feet. Christina, you must be joking. Get back to bed right away. I'll make the tea and bring it to you. You can barely stand. But it's uncomfortable for me, Christina tried to protest. Oh, stop it. My friend always says, it's only uncomfortable to sleep on the ceiling, the blanket falls off, Alfredo smiled, and Christina laughed. I've never heard that before. I'm glad you smiled. Now, off to bed, I'll take care of everything. Alfredo found cups, tea, and sugar in the kitchen and made tea for Christina. He placed the pastries on a plate and brought them to her. And you, she asked. Thanks, but I had a big breakfast, Alfredo lied. You can share with Emilia Santana if there's any left. There will definitely be leftovers. I can't eat anything right now. What's bothering you? Let me examine you, Alfredo offered, which caused Christina to blush even more. No, she refused firmly and abruptly. I just have a regular cold. A couple of days, and I'll be fine. Emilia's getting the ingredients, and I'll make a herbal infusion. By tomorrow evening, I'll be back to normal. Are you embarrassed by me? Alfredo asked, feeling shy himself. Christina looked him straight in the eye and asked honestly, "What do you think? If you were sick and I wanted to examine you in that state, would you like that idea?" Probably not, Alfredo admitted truthfully. He admired Christina's honesty and sincerity. It was rare to find such qualities in city girls. "Well, there's your answer," Christina said. "Christina, do you need anything?" "Just let me know, and I'll bring it," Alfredo offered. "No, thank you, I have everything I need." "Are you sure you'll be better in 2 days?" "Yes, I know a reliable remedy." "Why, is the clinic short on staff?" "No, I wanted to invite you to a restaurant on Saturday. It's my best friend's birthday, and he'll be there with his girlfriend. I'd like you to come with me." Defending a thesis would be easier than saying this, Alfredo thought. He was so nervous and afraid she would refuse. The few seconds Christina took to think felt like hours to Alfredo. "Alfredo Perez, are you sure about your invitation?" Christina asked. "Of course. What's bothering you? We barely know each other, and you're inviting me to a casual gathering." "Well, it's only Tuesday today. We still have plenty of time before then. But first, we should stop using formalities with each other, or it'll look strange, don't you think? We're almost the same age." "How old are you?" "I'm 24, and you?" "I'm a bit older." "I'm 31, Alfredo smiled. "Almost the same age," Christina laughed, and Alfredo melted at the sound of her bright, pure laughter. How had it happened that in just 2 days, this girl had stirred such a strong, unfamiliar feeling in him? He had been surrounded by many women of different ages, appearances, educations, and temperaments, but none had ever evoked such genuine and deep emotions in him. He sat down next to Christina and gently took her hand. "You're so amazing. I've never met anyone like you." "I'm just ordinary." "Well, almost. I think you might be seeing me through the wrong lens," Christina said shyly again. Of course, it was very pleasant for her to hear such words from a man she had liked immediately. From the very first day she saw him walking down the hospital corridor. The nurse standing next to Christina at the time had commented on Alfredo's appearance right away. "That's our deputy head of the department. Handsome, isn't he?" she said admiringly, watching Alfredo. "But no one stands a chance with him. They say he's a confirmed bachelor." "Maybe he just hasn't met the right person yet," Christina calmly replied. "Maybe, but you shouldn't dream about him. He's turned down quite a few women. We even had the mayor's daughter in for surgery. She tried everything to get his attention. Even came back a few times after being discharged. No luck, our Alfredo is like a rock." Then a thought struck her. Hey, maybe he's one of those, not interested in women. It's trendy nowadays. Emilia, don't make things up. He's definitely not one of them. If he turned someone down, it just means the girl wasn't right for him, and that's perfectly normal. Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of talk about his private life. It would be interesting to see his chosen one if she ever appears. Now, Christina was looking at Alfredo, who was holding her hand and gazing at her intently. She had even forgotten that she wasn't looking her best. When someone looks at you with such admiration, it's better than any mirror. Her thoughts were interrupted by Alfredo's voice. "Christina, I have surgery today, and I'm on duty tomorrow, but I'll come by in the evening, even if just for an hour. Is that okay?" "Of course. I'll be happy," Christina said, blushing yet again. "Tell me if you want anything. And please, don't be shy. Could you bring me some chocolate-covered prunes?" I love them, Christina blushed deeply. Oh yes, of course. That's no problem at all, I'll definitely bring them. He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. Just then, the front door opened. Emilia Santana had returned. I'll be off now. See you tonight. He winked at Christina and left the room. I'll be waiting for you, Christina smiled. Alfredo felt like he was flying back to the clinic on wings. He was filled with emotions. Christina liked him too. Maybe not as much as he liked her, but he had a chance, and Alfredo wasn't going to miss it. Standing near the clinic entrance was his father, talking with the deputy mayor. When he saw his son's car, he quickly ended the conversation and walked toward Alfredo. Where have you been? Benito Perez immediately asked. What's going on? Alfredo asked, startled. Why aren't you at work? Dad, what's wrong? Why are you scolding me like a child? I had some personal matters to attend to. My surgery is later, and I don't have any urgent duties right now. Can't I step away when necessary? No, you can't. It's the middle of the workday. And when I stay late at work for a whole day, you're not bothered by my overtime? Alfredo shot back. His father clearly didn't expect such a response, much less that his son would defend himself. How dare you speak to me like that? I'm speaking normally. You're scolding me like a schoolboy, forgetting that I'm an adult who can make my own decisions. I don't know who this girl is, but she's clearly having a bad influence on you. You never used to talk to me like this. Dad, it's the opposite. She's a great influence on me. You're just attacking me unfairly, and I'm responding. I think my reaction is perfectly reasonable. All right, go to work. Your patients are waiting. Alfredo could see that his father was not pleased with their conversation, but he felt he had done the right thing by standing up for his right to a personal life and space. It was time to stop always obeying his father in everything. He had achieved everything that was expected of him, and now it was time to pursue his own happiness. That evening, as promised, he visited Christina. She looked much better and healthier. Alfredo didn't forget and brought her a whole bag of chocolates. Oh my, so many. I'll be eating these for a month, Christina said, genuinely surprised. No problem, you can share them with Emilia, Alfredo said. How are you feeling? A bit better, thank you. So, are you coming with me on Saturday? You haven't answered yet. I will go, Christina said, blushing. Great. I'll pick you up at 6. I'm so glad you're coming with me. They chatted for almost 2 hours, and although Alfredo didn't want to leave, he eventually headed home. On Saturday, Alfredo arrived exactly at 6. Christina was waiting for him outside her building. When he saw her, he was speechless. She was wearing a soft pink dress that fell just below her knees, high-heeled shoes in a creamy color, and a matching purse. Christina had light makeup and her hair was beautifully styled. You look stunning, Alfredo said. His eyes sparkled, and Christina was flattered to see his reaction. Thank you. Emilia Santana and I put in some effort. I don't understand. What does Emilia Santana have to do with this? She used to be a hairdresser, so the hairstyle is her work. In that case, you're both brilliant. The evening at the restaurant went wonderfully. Christina charmed both Carlos and his girlfriend, Ingracia. They joked a lot and shared stories. Surprisingly, Christina could keep up with any topic of conversation. When Carlos went outside for a smoke, he invited Alfredo to join him. Hey, she's lovely, really. Where did you find her? I told you, at work. And you don't even know the half of it, Alfredo said mysteriously, giving a wink. I'll tell you more later, but I can say this, I'm truly in love. I've never felt like this about anyone. Congratulations, man. She's a great choice. Do you think my dad will like her? I think he will. How could he not? She's sweet, smart, charming, and incredibly delightful. I don't see how anyone wouldn't like her. He's been acting strange lately. I think someone told him we've been seeing each other. Alfredo, you're 31, not 15. Maybe it's time to stop doing everything your dad wants? If you like her, that's all that matters. He has to respect your choice, in the end. Yeah, you're probably right. Not probably, definitely. Now, let's go back to the girls before they get bored. After dinner, the group took a walk along the waterfront, and later the couples went their separate ways. Alfredo decided to walk Christina home, and they didn't arrive at her building until 2 a.m. Both were tired but happy. Alfredo walked Christina to her apartment door, and as she unlocked it, she turned around and kissed him on the cheek before quickly slipping inside. It was the gentlest and most innocent kiss of his life. 3 months passed. Alfredo was happy. They had confessed their love for each other, and Alfredo had proposed to Christina, which she had, of course, accepted. Now, it was time to introduce his fiancée to his father. He had purposely delayed this moment to avoid overwhelming Christina with the meeting. He had also been honest with her about his past, how his father had forbidden relationships in both high school and university. Alfredo, I don't think your father will forbid anything now. You're already an adult and a successful man. There's no reason for a ban. You sound just like Carlos, Alfredo smiled. I'll talk to my dad this evening and arrange a dinner for us to meet. His schedule is packed, but I know it's time to introduce you too. After all, the wedding is only 3 weeks away. I'm sure everything will go well. I'll do my best to make a good impression on your father. That evening, Alfredo drove home. On the way, he replayed the upcoming conversation with his father several times in his mind, trying to plan every detail. But, as is often the case, preparing for an important conversation and predicting all possible outcomes is impossible. His father was sitting on the couch, watching football. Alfredo knew better than to disturb him when he was watching an important game. "What are you watching?" Alfredo asked. "Hi." "The Champions League." "Hi," his father replied. To Alfredo's surprise, his father turned away from the game and said, "Are you planning to go to bed soon? I need to talk to you about something important." "Not yet, we can talk during halftime." "All right, I think we'll have time." "You've got 10 minutes, Benito Perez smiled. "No, I'd rather watch with you. I won't have time to take a shower in just 10 minutes anyway." When the first half ended, Benito Perez muted the TV and turned to his son. "Alfredo, I have a very serious proposal for you." Alfredo tensed up. His gut told him that this conversation wasn't going to end well. "You've got me intrigued. I also have something serious to discuss, but you go first. I'm planning to open a branch of our clinic in the capital and want to send you there as the director. What do you think?" "That's an exciting offer." "You never mentioned you were planning to open a branch," Alfredo said, surprised. "I've been working on it for the last 6 months. I wanted to surprise you. Your birthday is coming up, and the clinic will be my gift to you." "That's amazing. I really appreciate it, Dad, I do." "So, will you go?" "Of course. Who would say no to such a gift?" Alfredo replied, still surprised. "When would I need to go?" "The official opening is on the 15th. "Which month?" "This one, of course. But that's in just 10 days. I have surgeries scheduled for the next 3 months. These patients booked appointments specifically with me. I can't just leave them like that." Alfredo suddenly fell silent. "Dad," he added softly, "there's another reason I can't go for the opening." "Oh, really? And what's that?" Benito Perez asked sternly. "I'm getting married on the 17th. "What? And I'm the last to find out?" His father was furious. "Calm down, no one knows yet." "Well, except me and my fiancée, of course." "Have you already filed the paperwork?" "Yes, that's how I know the exact date. I was going to talk to you about it today." "When can I introduce you to her?" "Don't you think you should introduce me before filing paperwork?" I don't understand. What difference does it make? I'm the one getting married. I've made my decision, and now I want to introduce you to my future wife. I don't see a problem with the order of things. You've really changed. You used to always consult me before doing anything. Dad, I don't want to argue, but you have to admit that I'm an adult and have the right to decide whom I marry. Fine, when will you introduce me to your fiancée? And what about her parents? What do they do? She doesn't have any. She's an orphan, Alfredo said calmly. Is she from our city? Did her parents leave her a good inheritance? Dad, she was born and raised in a village, and a few years ago, she moved to our city, graduated from medical college, and now works as a nurse at our clinic. What? Benito Perez practically jumped off the couch in anger. She's just a nurse at our clinic? Do you even realize what you're doing? Are you trying to disgrace me in my old age? Why disgrace you? What have I done wrong? Alfredo genuinely didn't understand. Who are you and who is she? My God, what a disgrace. Perez's son marries a nurse from a village. How humiliating. She's a nurse, not a cleaner. And what does it matter who she is if I love her? For the first time in my life, I truly love someone. Oh, I've heard this all before. You'll fall out of love with her just like the others. It's no big deal. I don't understand. What do you mean, fall out of love with her? I mean exactly what I said. I will never agree to this marriage. Don't even try to persuade me. Dad, I'm not asking for your permission or approval. I'll invite you to the wedding, and you can decide for yourself whether you want to attend your only son's wedding or not. You wouldn't dare. If you marry that country girl, I'll disinherit you. I'd like to remind you that my mother also came to our city from a village, but that didn't stop you from marrying her. Don't you dare. Don't you dare compare them. That was a different time, and she's your mother, not some orphan from the countryside. Alfredo was starting to get angry. You know, Dad, you've always been my role model. I was sure I wanted to be just like you. But now I look at you and realize that I'll never be like you, because I don't want to. Alfredo suddenly shouted, I don't want my son to hate me for ruining his life, hiding behind my own goals and desires. Sure, I can understand back in high school, maybe even in college, but now, I'm sorry, I don't get it. What matters most to you is what others think, some made-up status, and God knows what else, but not my happiness. When I was 16, I might have doubted my feelings because of my age, but at 31, I can say for sure that I love this girl. Whether you like it or not, I'm marrying her. End of discussion. In that case, you can submit your resignation and pack your things. You don't live here anymore. Go off to the countryside with your little bride. Benito Perez was furious. Are you sure? Yes. Well, I hope that when you realize you've made a mistake, it won't be too late. Alfredo stood up and silently went to his room to pack. He only took the essentials. When he came back to the living room, he placed the apartment keys on the table and left without a word, slamming the door behind him. He drove to Christina's place, unsure of what he was going to say to her. How could he explain his father's actions without offending her? As he approached her building, he dialed Christina's number. Sweetheart, are you still awake? I'm about to sleep, I'm in bed already. Did something happen? Christina sensed something was wrong. Yeah, can I stay at your place tonight? Alfredo asked in a guilty voice. Of course. Why are you even asking? You know how Amelia feels about you. Then I'm coming up. It was nearly midnight when Alfredo arrived. Emilia Santana was already resting. She really liked Alfredo and never objected when he stayed over at Christina's. Christina stood in the hallway, looking at her fiancé in surprise. What happened? She whispered, trying not to wake the landlady. But Emilia must have heard something in the corridor and came out to see what was going on. Alfredo, good evening. What happened? Why do you look so lost? Alfredo looked at both women and honestly said, "I left home. For good." His last words sounded like a final judgment. "I wouldn't make such dramatic statements," Emilia said gently. "People often fight, especially family, but time passes and they reconcile unless they're fools. From what I know of your father, he's no fool. So, after some time, you'll surely make peace." "I think it's not so simple, and a lot depends on the reason for the fight," Alfredo remarked. "Alfredo, my dear, it's all just little things and emotions. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Don't worry, you two will work things out. The most important thing is that you stick together through everything. You know, you've actually calmed me down, strangely enough," Alfredo smiled. "My rich life experience works like a soothing elixir. Rest now, both of you. I'll go to bed and leave you to it." Emilia went back to her room, and Alfredo and Christina went into the kitchen. "Can you explain what happened?" Christina asked. Alfredo told her everything about the clinic opening, his father's proposal, his reaction to their wedding, the ultimatum, and the threat of being disinherited. Christina listened quietly, her face occasionally changing as she processed what she heard. "Alfredo, are you sure you're ready to give all of that up for me?" Christina asked, very calmly but also seriously. "Absolutely. Are you doubting me?" "No, I'm not doubting you," Christina replied honestly. "I just don't want you to later blame me for your falling out with your father or for losing your comfortable life and future because of me. Christina, my love, I would never do that. Do you know why? Because I'm an adult and not only make decisions, but also take responsibility for them. I've made up my mind, quicker than ever before. I already have a plan, but I'll need your help. You're my future wife, so we have to solve things together now. Of course, I'm ready to help. What do we need to do?" "For now, nothing. Tell me about your village," Alfredo said, surprising Christina with the request. Christina told him everything she knew, answering all of Alfredo's questions, not understanding why he was asking. But when Alfredo finally explained his idea, Christina was in awe. It was brilliant. "Christina, look, I need to work out my 2-week notice period before quitting, as per the law. You'll need to do the same. After that, we'll get married and move to your village. We'll open a medical center there and help people, me as a surgeon and you as an herbalist. I've also been looking into the area, and I came up with the idea to build a rehabilitation and recovery center for patients after illness. Of course, I don't have enough money to fund it myself, but finding a sponsor won't be too hard. I've even drafted a business plan and made some initial calculations. Plus, I have connections. I'm sure we can make it happen. Do you believe in me?" "Of course. I have no doubt it's an amazing idea. You have no idea what you're doing for the people who've lived there for years without proper medical care. And neighboring villages could also come to us for help. People would practically build that rehab center for you for free. Well, we won't go that far, but there's something to that idea." The next day, Alfredo and Christina handed in their resignation letters. No one could understand what was happening. Why would the son of the clinic's owner resign? How could this be allowed, considering how many people were waiting for his surgeries? Christina's resignation as a nurse didn't cause much of a stir. No amount of questioning or persuading could sway Alfredo. He asked the secretary to officially register his resignation and stated that the 2-week countdown had begun. During that entire time, his father didn't try to speak with him once. At the end of the 2 weeks, Christina and Alfredo left Benito Perez's clinic, and 2 days later, they got married. There was no wedding to speak of, they both agreed on that. They simply registered their marriage and then went to a restaurant with Carlos and Ingracia. Christina wanted Emilia Santana to join them, but she firmly refused, citing health issues. However, she did give the newlyweds a gift, a set of silverware that had been passed down to her from her grandmother. "Emilia Santana, we can't accept such an expensive gift," Christina protested. "Christina, I have no use for it. I have no children or grandchildren. Now you'll have something to remember me by. Maybe you could come with us? Alfredo suddenly suggested. Thank you, son, but I don't like the countryside, and it's a long trip. With my health, I'm afraid I wouldn't make it. That's a shame. We like you very much, and it's hard to leave you here alone, Christina said, nearly in tears. No, my dears, I've made up my mind, I'm not going. I'll ask Carlos and Ingracia to visit you, and you can always call them if you need anything, Alfredo said. Emilia nodded in agreement, but Alfredo knew she wouldn't call. She was proud, and Carlos and Ingracia were strangers to her. She wouldn't ask for help from strangers. After the restaurant, Alfredo and Christina returned to Emilia Santana's apartment, bringing her lots of delicious food from the restaurant. 2 days later, they packed their things and moved to Christina's village. The village turned out to be larger than Alfredo had imagined, with at least 70 or 80 houses, not small at all. However, the house where Christina grew up was nearly abandoned, having fallen into disrepair during her absence. It was uninhabitable. Alfredo quickly realized what needed to be done and went to see the village elder, as everyone called him. Facundo Suarez was relatively young for his role, around 60 years old. When Alfredo explained who he was and that he wanted to open a medical center at his own expense, Facundo was ready to carry him on his shoulders. My God, you've heard our prayers. Is this real? Facundo exclaimed, circling Alfredo as if worried he might vanish into thin air. There's just one small problem, Alfredo said. What problem could you possibly have, son? I'll solve all your problems. We have nowhere to live. Christina's house is almost completely destroyed, and winter is coming. We'll rebuild it next summer, but we need a place to stay this winter. Oh, dear boy. What do you mean, nowhere to live? We have several good houses that no one lives in, but they're well maintained. We've been hoping for a medic to come to the village. You'll have a place to live, and the medical center will be nearby. That's perfect. Alfredo exclaimed, relieved. Christina watched her husband, amazed at how easily this city man communicated with the villagers. It looked as though Alfredo had come home, while Christina was the one new to the village. What happened next in the village, once word spread about the doctor's arrival, was indescribable. People brought gifts, food, furniture, clothing, anything to befriend the new physician. They were even more surprised when they found out that the new doctor was married to their own Christina. Guests from neighboring villages came with their gifts as well. The house they were given was made of logs and had an incredible scent of pine. It was small, but more than enough for the two of them for the time being. Within a week, Alfredo had set up the medical center and started seeing patients, with Christina assisting him. A few weeks later, word of the miracle doctor and his wife spread beyond their village to the neighboring ones. Word of mouth worked its magic, and soon Alfredo's reputation reached the nearby town. A local farmer, who owned a large farm and a lot of land, came to see Alfredo. After being examined by Alfredo and Christina, his illness was correctly diagnosed, and he was given the right treatment. A month later, the farmer returned, eager to express his gratitude. I don't need money, but I could use some help, Alfredo said honestly. I want to build a rehabilitation center here. I need good quality wood, and I know you have your own sawmill. Could you help us with materials? We're planning to start construction at the end of March. Alfredo Perez, what kind of question is that? Of course, I'll help. I'll give it to you at cost, don't even think twice. That's how Alfredo found the right people and connections to make his dream a reality. By spring, all the preparatory work was completed, permissions were granted, and funding was secured. In mid-March, construction of the sanatorium began. At the beginning of summer, Carlos and Ingracia visited Alfredo and Christina. They were amazed by the scale of the project the couple had undertaken in the village. Carlos, you have no idea what village life is like. I never would have thought I'd enjoy it so much here. I can see you've even put on some weight. Carlos joked. Well, everything here is organic, homemade. You should move here, you wouldn't regret it. A dentist would be highly valued here, and you could work at my sanatorium. You'd be in high demand. You know, I might have to think about your offer, Carlos said. Then he paused and asked, has your father called? No, not once. And you? Definitely not. It's a shame things went the way they did. But I agree you did the right thing. You picked an amazing wife. I've never regretted marrying her. That's what matters. A year passed since Alfredo and Christina moved to the village. Life in the village didn't just stabilize, it flourished. The construction of the sanatorium and the prospect of jobs for the locals brought new energy to the community. The villagers practically worshipped Christina and Alfredo. They knew that if the couple ever left, the village would quickly die, and for good. Meanwhile, Benito Perez still clung to the hope that his son would come to his senses and return, asking for forgiveness. But a year passed, and Alfredo did not return. Curious about how Alfredo was living in the remote place where Christina had dragged him, he called Carlos and asked for Alfredo's address. Benito Perez, I'm sorry to say this, but I can't stay silent. If you're planning to visit them just to argue, don't do it. You've already hurt Alfredo deeply. I hurt him? Benito Perez snapped. Yes, you did. And I think you'll regret it soon, Carlos replied before hanging up, though he still gave Benito Alfredo's address. It took Benito almost a week to prepare himself, but in the end, he decided to visit his son and daughter-in-law. When he arrived at the village, he asked a passing woman where he could find Alfredo's house. Are you looking for our doctor? Oh, he has a big line of patients. You should have called ahead before coming. But if it's an emergency or something serious, Alfredo Perez will see you. He never turns anyone away. God bless him. And if not, his wife Christina can help with pain relief or herbal remedies. Such kind and good people. Benito listened with his mouth open, not expecting to hear such praise about his son. To be sure, he asked another person, a man this time, if he knew how to find the local doctor. The man was even more enthusiastic, praising the couple so much that Benito Perez was moved to tears. Finally, when Benito reached Alfredo's house, he saw a line of cars and a crowd of people. Approaching the group, he asked if it was possible to get in line to see the doctor, only to be told that Alfredo was no longer seeing patients that day. He had finished for the day at 6 p.m., and there were already too many people. What if it's an emergency? Will he still not see me? The woman looked Benito over suspiciously and said, well, if it's really serious, of course he'll see you. But we don't usually do that, we like to protect our doctor. He said he was done for today, so we'll just come back another time. Those from the far villages are always seen first, since it's hard for them to travel here every day. Before she could finish, Alfredo appeared at the door of the medical center, and the crowd fell silent, as if they were seeing a saint. Alfredo scanned the crowd and suddenly locked eyes with his father. To say Alfredo was surprised would be an understatement. He stepped off the porch and walked over to his father. They stood for a few moments, simply looking at each other. Forgive me, Benito Perez said, I was wrong. Not just to me, Alfredo replied softly. Through the crowd, Christina approached them. She was pregnant. Benito Perez looked closely at her. She really is beautiful. What a fool I've been, he thought to himself. Forgive me, children, Benito Perez said, tears streaming down his face. Never in his life had he felt such shame. He realized he could have lost his son, and possibly his grandchild, over pointless and outdated principles. Christina led her father-in-law inside, while Alfredo continued seeing patients. When the crowd had dispersed, Alfredo joined his father and wife. They talked until nearly dawn, with Alfredo sharing his plans for the sanatorium, the people living in the village, and the incredible nature surrounding them. I want to help you with the sanatorium. Will you let me? His father asked. I'd be glad if you joined, Alfredo replied. Then he suddenly lowered his gaze and quietly added, I've already chosen a name for it, Hope. Deep down, I hoped you'd understand everything and come, and I wasn't wrong.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.